Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's WorkSafe Tasmania Month webinar, Coaching WHS Cultural Change. I'm Stephanie from WorkSafe Tasmania and also the coordinator of WorkSafe Tasmania Month. I'll also be your moderator for this morning's session. Before we do get started though, I'd appreciate you taking a few moments to read the following slide about information delivered during WorkSafe Month sessions. I'd now like to go over a few items so that you know how to participate in today's webinar. So we've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your computer screen in the upper right corner. You're most likely listening in using your computer speaker system by default. However, if you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You'll also have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may also send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these questions and address them at the end of today's webinar. We are recording webinars during WorkSafe Tasmania Month and will progressively make these webinars available on the WorkSafe Tasmania website at the end of WorkSafe Month, which does conclude tomorrow. And lastly, before you do leave today's webinar, you will receive a short survey on the presentation, and we certainly do appreciate you taking a few moments to complete that survey and providing us with your feedback about the presentation and your webinar experience. So it is now my pleasure to hand you over to this morning's presenter from Sustainable Safety. We have Marley Flynn, and her presentation today is Coaching WHS Cultural Change.
Good morning. Before we start, I'd just like to give you some information on my background. It's all right, I've lost my screen and Stephanie's running to the rescue. But my background, the expertise that underpins this presentation. So I believe that my success. Do you want me to come down there? Sorry, Steph is just fixing my screen. It's just decided to drop out of the presentation. Be with you in just a moment. Just going to transfer to Steph's screen and I'll be with you. Won't be a moment. Okay, we're back in business. My apologies for that. Yes, as I was saying, I just wanted to provide you with a little bit of background to show you the expertise that underpins this presentation and to let you know that I believe my success in this field comes from but of not only of myself, but of the managers that I'm working with and the systems that they're working with. So constant measurement to determine what works and what doesn't. So welcome to this session. Sorry, Steph's coming again. We've really got gremlins today. We will get it going shortly. Okay, we're in business. Welcome to Coaching Work Health and Safety Culture and Change. I hope that the information I give you in this session will be useful and provide you with actions that will make a difference for you in engaging with your and coaching with your PCBUs officers and managers and getting them on board with work health and safety change. So what we'll cover today is we'll have a look at cultural change. We'll look at what is cultural change. We'll look at the beliefs versus reality that are often held. We'll look at how you can plan change. We'll have a good look at gap analysis because gap analysis through audit is one of the key features of what will support cultural change. And then we'll look at how you can progress this through the process. So we're going to do a little poll before we get started, and I'll just ask you to answer the questions in this poll. It'll just give me an idea of your main role in the workplace so that we make sure that as we go, we're targeting the right audience and giving you the right message. So the poll is about to be opened. So if you can just pop an answer in for that poll, that will come up on our screens. Thank you. Okay, we're going to close the poll now, so thank you for that. That's given us a good idea of who we're talking to. Looks like we've got a few senior managers and officers in there and managers, and some work health and safety officers and practitioners. So it's a good range across organisations. So as soon as we get those figures locked in, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so what is cultural change? We really need to break this down to the basics so that we're really looking at where we're going. And cultural change, or culture, I should say, is the behaviours and beliefs characteristic of a particular group. And change, of course, is to make or become different. So we need to be clear on what it is we want to achieve with that cultural change. And where does culture fit into our framework of OH&S? We have the system, which is usually the physical components, and then we have the practice, which is the implementation of the system, and the culture is the behaviours and beliefs applied to the implementation. So we also need to think about how we deliver our services and what's best for the people that we're delivering it to. So if you're a practitioner, that's your clients. If you're a manager or a senior manager, you're the one that's the main focus of culture in your organisation. So the message that you're putting across will have a huge impact on how the culture is changed. And we can't change behaviour until we change beliefs. So if you don't change a person's beliefs about safety, they will always revert back to the same behaviours. So it's really important that we understand that. Now, in my time in working in OH&S, I've made observations of leaders and managers in a wide range of organisations, and some of the observations that I've come across are those that are on the screen now. many of you will relate to this. If you're a manager or a senior manager, you'll be looking at your own performance and that of the managers under you, and thinking about what the observations are in your organisation. So many would like to have safe systems, but often their understandings get in the way of commitment. Many leaders and managers don't fully understand the legislation, particularly due diligence and shared responsibilities. And with due diligence, often it's the requirements for verification that they don't fully understand. So it's not enough to have good systems in place and tell people to go and do what it is that they're meant to do. You have to verify that that's actually happening, and that's very strong under this legislation and very important. The other one that a lot of people struggle with is shared responsibilities. So the buck stops with officers and PCBUs, and it's up to the officers and PCBUs to ensure that resources are provided to manage risks in the organisation. So they must know what the risks are to do this, and getting managers to understand that concept is very good in helping to change culture, because they must understand that they need to advise the officers of what's going on in the organisation and what the risks are. The other area that's often not known is Section 272 of the Work Health and Safety Act, and that's in relation to contractual relationships, and many managers struggle with this and our officers. Clause 272 of the Act states a term of any agreement or contract that purports to exclude or limit or modify the operation of this Act or any duty owed under this Act, or to transfer to another person any duty under this Act, it's a mouthful, I'm sorry, is void. So what they're saying is that you can't contract out of your responsibility, even in relation to contractors and subcontractors, though you retain those responsibilities. So how that's enacted is quite complex, but that's the situation. So these are areas where organisations often struggle to understand the implications of the legislation. Another observation that I've found is that leaders and managers often don't know what they don't know, and we'll get into the gap analysis side of things. There's strong evidence that leaders and managers are often very unclear on their areas of responsibility in relation to health and safety. So the gap analysis is a way of making sure that everyone's on the right page and knows what's required. Sorry, I'm having trouble getting to the next slide. I got it. Thanks, Steph. Okay, so beliefs that impede safety. We're working with these gremlins and we're getting there. So many people have beliefs that they carry with them, and these beliefs tend to impede their ability to take on good, safe practices. So some people would look at their workforce and say, yes, they seem to work safely. They have safe practices, and safe practices have an adverse impact on productivity and therefore lower profits. People don't get hurt very often. It's almost always minor. Insurance will take care of everything that goes wrong. And that one, David Dilger, in his presentation at Page Seeger for the Safety Institute in September, noted that insurers are beginning to look very closely at where negligence or lack of action is a factor in insurance covers. So that's something that we need to look at in the future. And they also believe that they can't change their workers' compensation premiums. But insurers are actually very happy to review premiums for organisations that can demonstrate sound systems and practices. But you must have evidence of that. A recent case I've worked with was an organisation that fairly small but fairly busy and lots happening, and they thought they had good systems and practice. When I talked to them, they said, yeah, we've got a really good culture. But when we went through a gap analysis through audit, we found that they only actually achieved 30% compliance, and some high-level risks were uncovered during that process of which they weren't aware. So beliefs are really important in making sure that we have a good understanding of what's going on in our organisation. Likewise, unexamined assumptions that we make every day without stopping to consider the consequences. That we don't think about them, we just do these things because these assumptions are there constantly. So things like, I'll be seen as weak if I take the soft options, we've always done it this way, safety is time consuming and costly, and we have a system, and the system isn't always quite what's expected, what's thought it might be. In relation to the safety is time consuming and costly, there's a strong belief that that's the case, and while that belief exists, it's very difficult to introduce change. However, the reality is quite different. When you have a good systems and have a good culture, there's actually a lower risk of injury. There's reduced cost in both direct and indirect costs in all sorts of aspects of injury costs. Improvement was spread to general business practices. So a good safety system will, for instance, risk assessment practices will spread to the whole business and improve risk assessment practices for things like financial risk. There's generally much higher levels of morale, there's better recruitment and retention outcomes, there's lower risk of penalties, and there's an added bonus of an enhanced public image, because organisations that have a good safety record do have an enhanced public image. And I can think of a couple such as DuPont is considered to be the guru in safety. Organisations like Simplot in the north of the state have a very good public image because of the strong safety culture that they use. So how can we get our leaders to embrace the opportunity for change? And some of you are leaders, so hopefully you'll have a look at this and think about this closely. When, as a practitioner, I find that one-on-one interviews on legislation and explaining in full the due diligence and shared responsibilities we talked about earlier with PCBUs and officers and managers really does have a big impact. People understand how that impacts on other people. The opportunity to measure our future progress from a positive perspective is very attractive to managers and leaders, because very often we don't know, as I said before, what we don't know. And so having that information provided will give us a good start on where we're going. And then support to get there through providing education coaching along the way is again a great way to get people on board, so that they're not floundering and they're not just having to spend so much time on looking for ideas. That information is available to them usually through WHS practitioners. So if this is presented as a positive experience, the opportunity to have clear actions and demonstrate measured improvement from today is very, very valued. Okay, so planning the approach to introducing change, we need to have reasoning to provide the organisation with evidence on why this is good and why it works. So that evidence can be the legislative requirements, as we've discussed. There can be statistics, and later, once a gap analysis is undertaken at appropriate levels, that information will provide evidence to show why change is required if indeed it is. Some organisations will be doing very well when they're audited, but the majority really do gain from going through that process. How to change? By establishing a baseline, drawing a line in the sand. So this is everyone's opportunity to demonstrate progress, and having documented evidence of that progress is invaluable not only to the organisation but also to their insurers and anyone else that they need to provide evidence to. So it might be accreditation requirements and things like that as well. And this involves everyone. So sometimes managers and leaders may not have the expertise for involving people. So getting some assistance with that can be very useful. Usually they're very good technical people, but they may not always have the skills in knowing how to involve everyone. So sitting down and discussing that with a practitioner can be very useful. Now, Hugh Mackay in his book, What Makes Us Tick, talks about the Hawthorne effect. And the best way I've found of engaging people in safety is through a gap analysis. So the Hawthorne effect is people are more likely to engage with us if we first take them seriously by engaging with them. So undertaking a gap analysis provides a strong mechanism for engagement as well as measurement of current status and future improvement from today. So when we do a gap analysis, it's focused audits at appropriate levels. In a large organisation I've been working with recently, I have gone back after 18 months and done reviews of their audits to see what the improvement was over that 18-month period. And on average, there was a 30% improvement across the board. But in some high-risk areas, there was up to 80% improvement. And these are the things that we did. We used a systematic approach according to appropriate standards. So in that case, it was Australian Standard AS4801, which is commonly used in Australia. We targeted each area to measure. We had set targets that we measured in each area. We delved into what they had. So we were seeking and testing evidence along the way. And this was done with the managers so they could see what was going on and understand. And we talked about how what we were doing would impact on safety and provided coaching along the way in each area that we're looking at. So this needs to be undertaken by facilitators with a good understanding of business, audit practice and the legislation and possible risks. So if you have people in your organisation who are going to be doing this, they may require training to be able to do it, but it provides a good result. So gap analysis will provide the baseline. It'll look at how the organisation is planning, the implementation and review of those plans. It'll look at the system availability and appropriateness and currency of the system. It'll look at how the organisation goes with engagement and communication with all parties in the organisation. And that one is huge. It's also very big in the legislation. It'll look at reporting and following through with hazard management. It'll look at things like training and training registers. And it'll look at the identification of all risks, not just those attracting incident reports. Now, Professor Helen Dicieri and her team at Monash University have undertaken extensive research into what's known as Organisational Performance Metric, which was developed by the Canadian Institute of Work and Health. And their research strongly supports the use of audit as a measure of positive performance indicators with a much more reliable measure of organisational health than lost time injury frequency rates or severity rates. So undertaking the gap analysis provides that positive reinforcement of what's required and the positive measures. Point 6, identification of all risks, not just those attracting incident reports. Most leaders and managers are not always fully aware of risks within their organisation. Most rely on incident reports as an indicator, which is fraught with danger due to poor reporting levels in some cases, and high risks with serious consequences may not attract incident reports. And someone I worked with recently, I came across a grinder where the operator had the switching, on-off switching back to front, and they had actually tampered with the machine when it wasn't working, and that was the result of their tampering. They knew that it worked that way and worked with that, but when they went on leave and someone else came along to use the machine, this was a high-risk incident just waiting to happen. So when we were looking at audit, for instance, we'd be looking at maintenance and how maintenance is undertaken and whether it's done by the appropriate people, such as electricians, and following up with that. So that's the type of risk that might be uncovered through this process that might not be identified in other ways. So suggested progression of the process of cultural change begins, in my opinion, with the audit process. So dissection, explanation, and discussion throughout. At the same time, having practitioners to provide support and education and encouragement for the implementation of the required actions that are identified in that support. And then assistance to break down the barriers, for instance, with the 360-degree safety conversations. So leaders and managers need to model good behaviours, to reward good behaviours, and that might just be commenting on things you've seen or raising it at team meetings, but also challenging poor behaviour. So not accepting that poor safety behaviour should be going on. So challenging that and asking not what you're doing wrong, but how can you do that better? Further, providing appropriate tools. So practitioners often have tools, and good ones are things like what-if scenarios. So rather than waiting until an incident occurs and then dissecting what happened, these are looking at what might occur and what could be done if that did occur before an incident occurs. Having a no-blame, positive focus on continual improvement, liaising with your insurers, so right from the start, before you start the process, liaising with them to find out how they can assist you and how this will impact on your insurance and premiums. And then after 18 months, reviewing audit results and evaluating progress so that you can demonstrate you've got documented progress of what you've done and how it's improved. And that's very valuable. So the difficulties of the process is ensuring triggers for commitment, so making sure that we're all aware of why that commitment is required and looking at the evidence of what's behind that. Another difficulty is doing audits is time consuming for work health and safety practitioners when they have so many other things to do. But the results are proven to be worthwhile, and it's really good benefit in using a work health and safety practitioner to undertake this process. The benefits will far outweigh the time required to do it. There's flexibility required from work health and safety practitioners that are undertaking audits because managers and leaders, busy people, and they won't always be able to work to a schedule, and you have to work around that. And the other one is ensuring that the practitioner that's undertaking the role has the right tools and skills and knowledge to undertake a gap analysis. So there's quite a bit to overcome to get this process happening, but it's very fruitful, and the benefits of the process are that the gap analysis will provide SMART goals that enable and encourage measurement of progress. So you'll not only know what you're doing, you'll know what you need to do, and you'll have the goals to do it. The education program focuses directly on needs, so it determines through the gap analysis what the needs are of each manager or leader, what areas are lacking and where they need improvement. So the whole process increases the confidence of leaders and managers because they know what's required and how to deliver change. So what we've covered today, we've looked at what is cultural change. We've looked at the beliefs versus the reality and examined a few of those unexamined assumptions. We've looked at how planning change can give leaders reason to change and prepare them for it. And then gap analysis through audit, giving engagement and gathering the facts about what's really happening in an organisation to underpin that cultural change. And then progression on how actions can move forward quickly and show results. So I hope you found that useful, and we'll take on board some of that information. At the beginning of the presentation, on the first slide where I've been introduced, I've added my phone number to that, so that if you have any further questions that aren't answered today or want more further information, you can feel free to ring me and ask me questions about that. I'm happy to provide more information on this process. Steph's just having a look to see what questions there are, and there are a few there. No? No questions. Okay, so that's not a problem. It's all right. Wrong list of questions, I think.
So thank you very much, Marley, for your presentation this morning, and we do apologise to everyone for those few technical issues that we did have happening during the presentation. But if you do have any questions that you would like to submit to Marley, please do type them into the questions pane on the right-hand side. We still have a few moments before the webinar does end.
Rachel Millets put there, do have one question. Okay, there's one here that says tips for engaging employee commitment in the process. If employees are involved in the gap analysis process, know it's happening, can feed into that, that can be very useful in bringing them on board as well. Likewise, having a commitment in team meetings, for instance, such as those what if scenarios, can be very useful. And also employees understanding that those shared responsibilities. I have a theory that employees, one of the biggest causes of incidents is loyalty, is people wanting to get on with the job and believing that taking risks is good for business. But when they understand the implications of that, they tend to be more willing to take on board the better culture. So it's with leaders demonstrating what's required and continually driving that home, that will help bring employees on board. Okay, there's another one here. Leverage to get leaders to contribute their commitment to changing culture. Again, going back to the gap analysis, when they see what's happening within the organisation, they tend to be more willing to get involved. And quite often leaders and managers will have a wish to demonstrate good safety practices, but they forget to go out and tell people what they're looking for. So getting them to go and talk about it and share their experiences can be really good in bringing employees online, and it'll give them a better response, a better confidence in dealing with their people and bringing them on board. Okay, leaders tend to make commitments and lose momentum over time. Yes, they can. And that's where continually revisiting audits and results can be very useful. And practitioners feeding them processes that they can undertake to continue that commitment. Just that reminder that they need to go and talk to people. They need to be available to talk about things at, say, committee meetings and team meetings occasionally. And one of the best things I've seen is where they do actually go out on site and talk to people. That will have a huge impact on how people respond to safety, and it gives the leaders a better picture of what's going on. Okay, I find that employees are reluctant to attend meetings and have resistance to the evidence, that is paperwork side of safety. Okay, in an organisation, we have a responsibility under the legislation to communicate and consult with employees. So if you're the boss, you're the one that has a say on who needs to make that commitment. In one organisation, I know they've made a financial incentive to people demonstrating their commitment. And I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but it's up to you or your leaders and managers to say, this is a part of your role, this is a responsibility that we have, you have a responsibility under the Act as well, and we expect you to come to meetings. So if they're not coming, they're not fulfilling that responsibility under the legislation, therefore they're breaking the law. So that's a good incentive if nothing else works. Okay, can you recommend any great stories about companies that have made great changes in culture? Yes, DuPont is one I mentioned. If you search on the internet, Les Mapstone at DuPont, that's an organisation that's got some really good stories out there. Also, organisations in Tasmania, Simplot's one that comes to mind. They've done some great work in safety. It's hard to give you specific examples of the companies I've worked with. I have seen huge change, but I haven't got the permission to share that information with you. But both in large and small organisations, big changes. But if you'd like, if anyone wants more information, as I said, feel free to give me a ring and I can talk you through that, and I can provide examples if required. So thank you very much for attending this session and for giving us your time and for putting up with a few hiccups. We hope that's not been a problem for you. And this is the last session, I think, for WorkSafe Month. So Steph will be, I think she'll grow some more hair where she's pulled it out, but she's done a brilliant job. And on behalf of all the presenters and participants, I'd like to thank Steph for all she's done in getting these sessions to you. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next year. Bye.